You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to start enjoying your life. You can do that much earlier and start living a life that you love and that's true to you. Welcome to Freedom Before FI. Using FIRE and life design techniques, we help you create freedom on your way to FI instead of waiting until you're retired to do the things that light you up. I'm your host Greg, a FIRE movement and life design enthusiast. If you're itching to get freedom now, then let's do this. Hello there, and welcome to the first episode of Freedom Before FI. We'll be kicking off this podcast with a 3-part mini-series just to give you a flavour of our philosophy and more importantly, how we can help you. Over here, we're all about designing and enjoying your ideal life before reaching early retirement. It's about taking elements of what you think you do in retirement and doing them in your day-to-day life now. For me, I was able to tick off one of my life goals, which was to live abroad, somewhere warm. Currently, that's the Philippines in Southeast Asia, and I moved here from UK about 5 years ago. I've also managed to find pockets of freedom on my journey to FI, and I'd love to share them with you. And by the way, I'm still on that journey, but I'd love to go on this journey with a community of like-minded people, and that's you, by the way. Oh, and before we begin, I do have to apologise for the birds in the background. We have a few trees and nooks around the roof that they just love chilling in. The birds around here are actually quite cute and they're small. We call them Maya birds, and they're much more adorable than the pigeons we had back in London. Anyway, they'll be my companions on this podcast going forward. Alright, so I'm guessing if you're listening to this, then you're either fairly new to the concept of the FIRE movement or perhaps a few years into your journey and looking for freedom sooner. Quick warning, I'll be hitting you with a lot of acronyms today. If you're a complete newbie, which is absolutely fine by the way, I'll be saying FI or FI a lot, which stands for Financial Independence, and also FIRE, FIRE, it's a movement which stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. In a nutshell, the main aim is to aggressively earn, save and invest to reach a point where you can retire early, let's say in your 30s, 40s and 50s. Okay, so on this first part of the mini-series, I wanted to focus on retirement and specifically early retirement, as it's usually the ultimate goal when it comes to FIRE. With this mini-series, I wanted to start with the end in mind, i.e. retirement, then work our way backwards. The reason why I wanted to start with retirement is because we can get hyper-focused on the retirement aspect, but the problem is, for some people, just like myself, who doesn't earn a massive salary, it can seem quite far away. But I'd like to try to reframe our thinking about retirement, to flip it on its head and see if we can in some way start living our lives now as if we were retired. Well, at least in some way, shape or form. Okay, so if we think about some typical reasons to reach FIRE and retire early, the thought process of some people will likely be along the lines of the following 2 statements. The first one is, I really hate working and I don't ever want to work again once I'm retired. I just want to chill. The second one is, I want to retire early so I can travel around the world and volunteer for charities that are meaningful to me. So again, these are just some example thoughts of someone wanting to pursue FIRE. Essentially, the gut instinct here is that life would be so much better once we reach FIRE. Therefore, I'm going to put my head down and grind away for the next 8 to 20 years, give or take, to get to FIRE. Then I can live my dream life and everything will be fine. Here's the thought though. What if you can do those things you want to do in retirement much sooner instead of when you're retired, but still be investing and working towards early retirement in the background? Wouldn't that be interesting? So, going back to those 2 potential thoughts I said earlier, as I want to try to reframe those thoughts a little. The first one was, I really hate working and I don't ever want to work again once I'm retired. If you really thought about it, would we actually stop working altogether once early retired? Okay, maybe we won't be working for the first few months, and you'd likely be relaxing and binge watching old episodes of Game of Thrones. But once recovered, I'm pretty sure the majority of us would want to be doing some type of work, because there's only so much Netflix binging we can do until it gets boring. But maybe the work we'll be doing is a bit more meaningful and something that you'd do even if you weren't getting paid. I would bet that any early retiree would not just stop working altogether once they hit FI. I'm convinced they would all be doing something productive with their time, something that they really enjoy even if it's just part-time. Here's the interesting part. If we peeled back the layers a bit more, maybe this person doesn't actually hate work in general, maybe they just dislike their current role or industry. What if we found ways for this person to enjoy their job, maybe by changing some aspects of it to make it more tolerable, like working hours, location, position, or a different team perhaps. Or better yet, find a job that they'd love to do in retirement and see if they can start doing it now. Would that help? Okay, just bear with me here, I'm just giving some food for thought. How about that second potential thought I said earlier? The I want to stop working so I can travel around the world and volunteer thought. Okay, so what if we found a way so this person can afford to take multiple extended breaks throughout their career, like sabbaticals and mini retirements to travel, or better yet, find a role that lets them travel, but the work involved is similar to the volunteer work they desired in retirement? One thing to ponder on also is what if they did get to retirement and done the travelling and volunteering thing to find out that they didn't even like it and their preferences changed? The point I'm trying to get to is it worth grinding away 8 to 20 years, delaying our dream life, missing those potentially younger years of our life, in air quotes, for financial gain, or getting to that fire mountaintop, then realising it wasn't all that it's cracked up to be, or worse still, potentially losing sight of more important factors in life, like physical and mental health, important relationships, meaningful projects, family time, self-care and things like that, thinking I should have designed and lived my ideal life earlier. One of my favourite fire bloggers, Jess from the Pioneers, says it the best though. She said, "What if we designed a life that we didn't want to retire from?" Mic drop. Bars. I'll repeat that. What if we designed a life that we didn't want to retire from? Now wouldn't that be something? Of course, there might be people that don't mind working away for 15 to 20 years for a subpar job that's not in alignment with them, then reaching fire afterwards, and that's absolutely fine. But over here, as the title says, we're much in the camp of enjoying our journey to fire, because we only have this one life to live, and as we'll learn from retirees later, it's not all about the money. Okay, so how about traditional retirement, i.e. the non-fire way? Some retirees actually struggle to transition from their career to retirement because their identity was embedded in their job title. When they finally retired, they didn't actually know what to do or didn't have the tools, resources or energy to figure out how to design their ideal life for their twilight years. I read an article recently where a doctor said that we need to carefully plan for retirement, but not the financial aspect, more the psychological aspect, like purpose, interests, connections, meaningful activities and what have you. He said, you don't wait until the day you retire to say, maybe I should put some money aside for retirement. But for some reason, when it comes to the psychological aspects of retirement, we don't really plan ahead. But what if we did start planning those things way ahead of time and started doing those things we loved much earlier, so by the time we got to retirement, we just continue doing those activities? Looking at my own family, my dad's retired, he's currently 75 as of the date of this recording, and he retired a couple of years ago. We were having a chat recently, and I told him about some of the sabbaticals and mini retirements I've had on my journey. My dad, on the other hand, I think he worked like 50 plus years as a civil engineer, taking no extended leave at all, just your typical annual leave days here and there. He said to me that he'd wish he'd taken some sort of a career break himself to just spend time on his passions and hobbies, so that when he retired, he'd just stroll into doing them. Essentially, he pretty much worked all his life and waited for retirement, which is what most would do in his generation, being a baby boomer. Of course, he did enjoy his life along the way, but I'm pretty sure he would have loved to stop and do things he'd love along this journey. Okay, so from the perspective of people that have retired early, there are examples of prominent fire bloggers who just grinded away to reach fire as quick as they could, and then looked back and hated their journey. They wish they took it slower and done things differently. They feel they missed out on life. Or sometimes they reach fire, but only to find it wasn't a fix-all solution, or their non-money problems were still around. In fact, those non-money problems were even more obvious because they didn't have work to distract them from it. I always think that fire is just one aspect of our lives, it's just the financial part. But we have other aspects of our lives, like health, family, and relationships. I found an interesting study of actual retirees in US. They surveyed those that went through traditional retirement. One of the questions they asked was along the lines of, in retirement, what is your source of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment? 76% of the retirees answered, spending time with loved ones. 67% answered, being true to myself. 64% answered, doing interesting and enjoyable things. And guess what aspect was answered the lowest? Money. Yes, that's right. Only 15% of the retirees said being financially wealthy gave them a source of purpose and meaning. It's a good reminder that at the end of the day, money is not what gives us fulfillment, and it shouldn't be. With that then, we know we need to achieve some sort of balance. We know money is important to give us time to do the things that we love to do. So the big question is, how do we strike a nice balance between all the aspects in our life while still pursuing FIRE? And on top of that, find our versions of freedom way before retirement. There's a lot to balance there, but luckily I have an answer for that, and it's 2 words: life design. Yes, life design or lifestyle design. And the awesome thing is, we don't need a degree or a PhD in life design to design our lives. We can just use the principles, and in fact, it's not just a one and done thing. We don't just sit down and design it once and that's it. It's actually a continual process throughout our lives. So what exactly is life design? I'll be going through that on the next episode. I'll see you there. Alright, so here are some key takeaways from the first part of this little mini-series. The first one was the importance of not waiting for retirement to create our ideal life. Let's create it now if it's possible. The second point is, can we reframe how we think about early retirement and find elements of what we think we'd do in retirement and start doing them now? Essentially, how can we create a life that we don't want to retire from? Thirdly, we then talked about how some early retirees regretted just working to get to FIRE quickly and regretted that they didn't take it slower. They feel like they missed out on some key life experiences. And then the last takeaway was identifying what should we actually focus on in our lives. And it definitely wasn't money, although we do need it. It was more for things like family time, being true to oneself, and doing things that we find enjoyable. If you think this episode would help a friend, please don't hesitate to share it with them. The show notes can be found at freedombeforefire.substack.com. If you have a question or want to connect, feel free to send me an email at freedombeforefire@proton.me. That's freedombeforefire@proton.me. If you found this show useful and want to be notified of future episodes, you can follow us on Spotify or Apple via the show's main page or on whatever app you're using right now. And lastly, if you've just learned one good thing that will help you in your journey and you want to help us out here, please do leave a 5-star rating on your podcast player app. If you're using Apple Podcasts, you can even leave a nice review by scrolling to the bottom of the podcast page. That would help us out loads.